Political campaigning is underway in South Africa. These voters in this township near Winterveld in the northeast of the country have about 6 months to make up their minds before voting in what could be the country's most competitive national elections since the end of white minority rule. The Democratic Alliance Party, campaigning behind me, has been on a bus tour of townships for the past 2 weeks. One of a growing number of parties seeking to wrest votes from the African National Congress, which has gained more than 60% of the vote at every election for the last 20 years. The ANC swept to victory in 1994, the year that marked the end of apartheid and the start of the party's golden era, led by Nelson Mandela, whose image still adorns the walls of the ANC's headquarters in downtown Johannesburg. But next year, the party will head into elections with its credibility tarnished by allegations of corruption and cronyism, while frustrations mount among many black South Africans about the lack of economic transformation and poor delivery of services.
Inequality, poverty and unemployment have been registered as triple concerns for the ANC. But the reality of the matter is we are working very hard on those issues. The moderate growth in the economy is happening because of the investment of the government in the main. And the moderate creation of employment happens in the public sector in the main. It would have been quite helpful and it will work better if the private sector come to the party and work together to improve the situation in the country.
The Democratic Alliance, the ANC's main opposition, won about 24% of the vote in local elections in 2011. It will be looking to build on those gains in 2014 elections, but struggles to shed off the perception that it's a party for white voters.
What we have to do is garner enough support to be able to get a foot in government. And I think as people taste and see that government in action, they'll shift over en masse, because ultimately the issue of black and white can also sometimes parades itself in other issues where people sit back and they say, well, what are white interests? If white interests are about good schooling, good healthcare, those are interests that everyone has. And I think when people see those and they desire those, they come on board.
Two new parties will also be contesting the 2014 elections. A hang led by Mamphela Ramphele, the former partner of anti-apartheid icon Steve Biko, and the economic freedom fighters headed by Julius Malema, the radical former leader of the ANC's Youth League.
I have no doubt that both Ahang and the economic freedom fighters will be in parliament next year. What should worry the ANC is any downward slide in its support. And if indeed a downward slide in 2014, no matter how small it is, establishes a downward trend, the next question that will arise is the number of elections it will take for the ANC to eventually lose power.
Moletsi Mbeki, the brother of former President Thabo Mbeki, says the situation in South Africa has led to a decline in the country's political standing on the continent.
So the expectation really was that 15 years later, the new government would have been through its learning curve and would be on its way to run the situation properly. What has happened is that the reverse happened. After 15 years, we started to get chaos within the government and within the ruling party. So then both the poor and, ironically, the business community feel that instead of the government learning and stabilizing, it's becoming unstable and creating uncertainty.
The ANC's history of leading the struggle against apartheid, as well as its well-oiled election machinery, means it is still forecast to win next year's election. But with its credibility increasingly under the microscope, both in cities and in townships like this, some commentators are now predicting that its share of the vote could fall below the symbolic 6% mark for the first time. If that did happen, that would be a watershed moment for both the party and the country. Andrew England, Financial Times, Winterveld, South Africa.